Thanks, Ethan, once again to join our podcast today. And we'll go from there where we left last time. We learned about your journey as how you joined in as a senior manager at Amazon, and you ended up at being a VP. So let's talk a little bit about your journey when you initially joined as a senior manager back in the day at Amazon. What were some of the things that you had to do to rise up the ranks to become a VP? Like, what are some of the things, if you can highlight, in your career that you had to do? Because generally, the VP level positions are very far and further between. So how do you basically navigate that journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of steps. A phrase I created at Amazon, though, like I used for myself, and some people recognize for me, as I said, results are the currency of credibility. So in the end, no one rises without generating results. Companies and managers pay you to make a difference as a leader. As a leader, you're expected to make a positive difference for the company. So I think the most fundamental thing I did was I shipped projects, and I had a better than average track record of getting things actually to market, which everyone, sometimes projects get canceled or redirected or shut down, but I built a lot of stuff. And so while there's other things we can talk about, building good relationships with superiors and volunteering for new assignments and having good ideas, the baseline is always producing results.
Right. I think that's a very fundamental question. I would imagine many of the projects that you might have worked through, there might have been dependency upon partner teams or sister organizations, and especially in those complex environments where a lot of other teams are also involved. Sometimes you don't control all the levers to produce results by yourself. So in those situations where maybe the other teams were not aligning well, or there was large dependency upon them, how did you focus on delivering results if some of the contribution had to come through these partner organizations and they were not delivering on time, or just pushing bad or just acting hard? How did you solve for that?
So Amazon as a company has tried very hard to avoid that problem. They have a concept called single-threaded leaders, where they try to make give the leader all the resources they need to do their job. And this has been called different things at the company. Single-threaded leader is one. They had a thing called two pizza team leaders, but it was always this idea of get all the people needed to do the job under one manager. Still, that's not perfect. Not everything, if you think about Amazon, for example, we can't all rebuild our own customer service function. We can't all go build our own warehouses.
Yeah.
So the other concept they had that was very good was they required every other team to have what they call a hardened API. So the idea was, I should be able to use your service without talking to you. You should have to have a published API that I can use. Now, again, this wasn't perfect, but they pushed other teams of people shouldn't have to talk to you to use your service. It should be publicly usable. And that's how we got to AWS, was the idea that if it can be publicly usable internally, it might as well be publicly usable externally. And that's the only way to scale. But since this didn't always work, there were two other options. One option was, if you did have a dependency on someone and they wouldn't meet what you needed, I guess there were three options. One, you could rebuild it yourself. And there's a famous story in Amazon where a leader asked Jeff Bezos, why do you keep letting people duplicate stuff? And he said, well, because 2 is better than 0. And he felt, if I try to force people to work together, then nothing happens and I get 0 of what I want. I'd rather pay the price to have 2 than to always end up with 0. And so that was option one. Option two was the idea of what we called away teams. So Bezos loved Star Trek. And Star Trek has this idea of, oh, we're going to send an away team. We're going to take people on the ship and we're going to beam them down to the planet and they're going to fix that alien culture. It was very, Star Trek was very, the humans are going to fix everything. But his idea was you could take a piece of your team and loan it to the other team and basically say, you're telling me you don't have time to do this work. Fine. We're going to loan you 3 engineers to do it. And they're going to come do it in your code. Well, again, the theory was other teams weren't allowed to say no to that. They weren't allowed to both say, we have no time to help you, and we don't want your people messing around in our code.
Right.
So you would push them and say, well, if you don't want our people messing around in your code, do it yourself. But you can't say no to both. Now, sometimes people still tried to say no, and I get why. They say like, well, yeah, but you don't know our code base. You're just going to make a bunch of a mess. You could negotiate that, but you basically say, well, I will loan you enough people to like free one of your guys. We'll do some of your work so that you can help do some of our work. So that was the second way to unblock yourself. And then the third way to unblock yourself was to hack. And by hack, I mean, I often found ways to build things that weren't long-term scalable, that weren't sustainable, but they got it out the door. And then once something was out the door and customers were using it, you could get the resources or the attention to do it right.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So essentially, you're kind of boiling it down that you got to kind of make it work some way, either through like partnership with the other team or lending them resources, or just basically build a kind of a minimal viable or like a POC or a workaround, so to speak, just to get the ball rolling. And once there is enough traction, then basically get more buy-in to get more resources. And
yeah, and this is where I would say, I always get in trouble with this statement when I make it online. I don't think hack is a bad word. And there's always the purists who are like, hacks are always dangerous and you're building tech debt. Well, I'd rather have something that's successful making money and has tech debt than a monument to beautiful architecture that never ships.
right.
And of course, people say, well, what about having both? What about having the beautiful architecture that does ship? Sure. In a perfect world, yes. But I deal in imperfect worlds. And, sometimes the right thing to do is create a mess and clean it up later, knowing that it will be more expensive later. Because if you don't get it done, the world will change before you get a chance. I was talking to somebody about this earlier today. Speed matters because your competitor is willing to hack. And, if you look at so many first generation offerings, whether they're apps or whatever, they're kind of crap, but they're good enough to show the idea and get people excited. The first Tesla was kind of crap. It was custom built. It was expensive. There were very few places to charge it, but it was also very fast and got people excited, like, ooh, a new type of car. And so while I'll offend some Tesla people, the fact that the first Tesla was kind of crap was a good idea. And there's lots of analogies to this. And they, you got to get out there. So you ask how I got promoted. I got things built that worked well enough to build version 2.
Right. So tell me one thing. So it almost seems like that if you have a recipe to kind of bias for action and you continue to push through some way or the other, you just do it and get things shipped out, then magic will follow and automatically, you are on the fast track and going up. What is the role of like luck and circumstances in the whole set of things? So I'm just throwing it out there. What do you think about it?
Well, of course, I think luck plays a huge factor. I think it's hard to separate. In the hindsight, it's always hard to separate. So when I was growing very fast at Amazon, I started with a team of 6. My very first team for the first year, I was a senior manager with 6 people, which actually means I wasn't even managing other managers. I just had 6 individual contributors. Fast forward 8 years, I'm a VP with 800 people, so 120 times as many people.
Right.
Now, over my whole career, which was a little longer though, Amazon itself grew 100 times. It grew 100. When I joined, there were about 14,000 people. When I left, there were about 1.4 million. So 100 times as many. That kind of growth is very rare.
Yeah.
And so how much of my growth to VP was I'm a great leader, and how much was I was at a place that grew 100-fold? We'll never know. You know, when I tell the story I want to be proud of, the story is, wow, look at all the great things I shipped. If someone else wants to throw stones, they say, yeah, he was at a place that grew 140 or 100 times. If he didn't grow with it, like, what was he doing? You know, he was just a leaf on the water and the water went up. Well, it's both. What do you do about that? You can't worry about it that much. There were people in Amazon who didn't scale, who left and quit and failed. And there were also some people at the company who scaled even faster than I did. So part of it, you know, this is a little bit that debate of nature versus nurture. You know, how much of your circumstances, where you're born and who your parents are, and how much of it is how hard you work? Well, both.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to pull those apart.
No, that makes a pretty good, answer. I like that. So this kind of brings me to the point that, while we are at it and, the company is growing, the person is growing, and everything kind of is moving forward, then what is the contribution of so what I'm getting from this is that it's kind of very hard to pull apart, like, what is the what portion of contribution is the self contribution and what is the circumstantial kind of thing that kind of helped take it forward. Then it brings me back to this thing. So is leadership something that you think can be coached and mentored and trained, or people are born with those qualities to just keep pushing forward, very motivated, determined to get things done? Or is this something is basically coachable, and where do you think is the line?
Yeah, I think leadership is very coachable. What's more difficult is, where do you end up being a leader? If I'll talk more about coaching and the ability to grow leadership skills in a minute, but if you end up in a bad situation, or just an unlucky situation, or even just a normal situation, being a great leader won't get you as many results. Because I had a tailwind. I had a tailwind of being at one of the fastest growing companies on earth. But leadership itself is a learnable skill set. I have what's called a growth mindset. A lot of people know that term. I believe that we can learn new skills, particularly soft skills. Leadership is, I did not set out to be a leader. I wanted to be a pure engineer. I grew up like a lot of people, reading Dilbert and thinking that being in management was like the dark side and a horrible place to go. And then I saw that nobody was doing it, and my team and I were suffering because no one was making those decisions. And I kind of went into it naturally, like, okay, well, frankly, my theory of leadership at the beginning was, I'm better than no one. Like, it's hard to do it's hard to do worse than nobody doing this. So I'll try it. And then I found I liked it. I liked solving human puzzles. So I saw human puzzles as just another type of engineering puzzle, but like with pieces that didn't say static, because people change and their attitudes change, and they go home one day happy, and then they have a fight with their, uncle or whatever, and they come back the next day mad, and you can't count on where they're going to be every day. I found that exciting. But you can learn about humanity and about organizing and motivating and setting goals, and so you learn all that stuff of leadership of how to inspire and how to get clarity and how to push people, also how to hold them accountable if you need to. Those are learnable skills. And I think luck plays a huge factor in how much that pays off. You can get good at being a leader. I had the advantage that sometimes Amazon had the budget to let me double my team this year and then double it again and double it again. That's marketplace. That's the luck part.
Right. No, that makes sense. So basically, what I'm hearing is that while there are skills that you can basically learn, so let me ask one more thing. How important is being able to communicate as a leader? Like a lot of people that I know are pretty introverted and they don't speak much, but still seem to be good leaders. Especially don't see them speaking publicly, or like they're not well known to like speak out in front of people, but still they get work done. And when while there are other leaders like in celebrities, or like even politics, or even in like tech as well, where people tend to speak quite a bit, they have like a huge following, and then people consider them as also leaders. How do you kind of differentiate between the two, one like more reserved and more introverted, and one more extrovert and very vocal?
So I think the unfortunate truth of modern society is that being vocal has benefits. The best idea in the world kept to yourself will never have any results. Whereas maybe not the best idea, but a pretty good idea sold widely will have a lot of results. And I think for better and worse, we see this. Obviously, we see, politicians. Just think of any politician you don't like. Doesn't matter where you're from or what party you just think of a politician you don't like, and you'll see someone who's having a lot of impact by talking a lot. So obviously being able to speak has a lot of power, being able to influence. Introverts can learn this. It takes more effort. It takes more practice and more energy, but even deeply introverted people can learn to communicate. They may have to do it in writing, right? It may be that their influence comes from writing, not from speaking more. But communication is very vital. And I've actually been thinking about this a lot right now with AI automating more tasks. Influence human relationships and your ability to influence other humans is going to become more valuable, because a lot of the things that introverts do are subject to more automation now. And it's harder to automate influence, because influence depends on trust and human relationship. And I'm not going to make any pitch that like amazing artificial talking heads won't simulate some of that in the future. But right now, that's harder to automate. And so I actually think that's going to become a more valuable skill.
So basically, personal skills, ability to connect, communicate, like the soft skills that we term it as soft skills, are kind of more, important, as opposed to just getting things done and etc., especially on the leadership side of things, and being able to communicate them. This brings us a very good point, actually. So you mentioned about impact of AI on the jobs and the economy and the automation, and a lot of people are talking about ChatGPT and GPT-4, etc. And there have been a lot of conversation around that. In the next like 2 to 5 years, we'll see a lot of basic workflows, areas like customer support, or basic HRMS systems, or even other systems that do involve a lot of workflows could get completely automated, which will have a severe impact on not only a lot of workers which are blue collar, but also on the white collar people. How do you see this playing actually?
So I don't know, or I'd be working on the VC side very quickly, placing super smart bets. I agree with the general idea there's going to be a lot of disruption there. What is unclear is, will the disruption simply get rid of some of the drudgery and allow people to do more value-added work? Or will it truly eliminate some jobs? And I think it will do some of both. If you look at past revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, the tech revolution, some old jobs are just gone. Nobody weaves things by hand anymore. That's gone. You know, most people aren't carpenters or cobblers, shoemakers. It gets done in a factory. If you move to tech, you know, there used to be people who added and subtracted numbers manually, and they were literally called calculators. Of course, that's gone. You don't have big rooms of mathematicians. Some jobs will be eliminated. Some will only be smoothed. What's unclear to me is exactly how fast that will be and what the portion will be. But I think it's important to be thinking about, I would advise almost anyone in a professional job right now to be thinking about what parts of my job are hardest to automate and how can I get better at those so that I'm sure I have some outlets for my future, because there will be some losers, you know, and the benefits of automation are mostly going to go to the companies that make the automation. They're not going to go to, like, there are going to be some victims. And I know that's not a popular, I'm not trying to be, you know, horrible about it, but I think there's going to be some losers, some people who their job just gets automated and they get fired, and then they'll have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So I'd like to draw your attention towards, another boom that just happened not so long ago, just about 5 to 10 years ago. There was a flurry of bots that kind of came in, and every big company, big tech had their own bot who was trying to solve, especially customer service problems, customer support, etc. And fast forward, all telecom companies, all banking companies, whenever you try to reach out to them, they would have a bot behind the system. And we have seen how it has played out in the last 5 to 10 years, that every time you talk to a bot, you get frustrated because you know it's not going to answer anything that you ask of it. And it's just like it irritates you quite a bit. And by the time you reach to a actual human being, that bot has already asked all the questions that you said. And then the human being basically repeats the same questions again, which adds to your frustration, etc. Right? So at that point of time, and you might have heard about, like, Watson came out initially with Jeopardy game, and they were trying to come out with this question answer format. And then Azure had its own cognitive framework, AWS, like every company have their own broad frameworks, etc. And a lot of automation companies like UiPath and other kind of things also kind of focus on the same, not necessarily in a bot, but they kind of automate the workflow, etc. So given that, a lot of that has happened, and at least on the consumer end, we have not seen the great value, the promise that was supposed to be with AI coming in, and we still have a lot of contact center jobs. A lot of countries such as Philippines and Vietnam and India, etc., still have tons and bunch of people who just do contact center where they respond to the customer queries, whatever. Even in Latin America. So given like how this ChatGPT has coming in, and people are, at least right now, there is a huge euphoria in the market about everybody jumping into coming out with their own version of ChatGPT and integrating into their workflows, etc. Do you think that this time around the outcome may be a little bit different, or there is a likelihood that this may also go down the same routes that we saw in the previous bot revolution just like 5 to 10 years ago?
So my personal opinion is this time it's going to be different. I could be wrong, but here's my analogy. I'm a little bit older, and so I saw Apple build a device called the Newton, which was supposed to be, you can look it up if you're not familiar with it. It was like a handheld home. It was a handheld smart device, and it failed miserably. And then later, like it was just a failure. It was big and slow and didn't do very much. Then later, Palm built the Palm Pilot, and that was better. It was smaller, it did more, people used them, they were very popular for a while. Then BlackBerry built a phone with a keyboard, and then finally you get the iPhone. The question you're asking is, we know that the bots were the Newton, they didn't work. The question is, are we at the Palm Pilot, are we at the BlackBerry, or are we at the iPhone?
Yeah.
I can't tell you for sure. I feel we're at least at the BlackBerry, where ChatGPT is going to have a lot of impact. You know, it's funny. BlackBerry is now like when I say BlackBerry, people think of a dinosaur phone. Like, oh my God, it was so old and dumb.
Right.
But at the time, it was revolutionary, like a phone that also did email.
Right.
And so I'm not sure which one we're at, but even if it's just a BlackBerry, remember, BlackBerry was a miracle until they were a donkey. and I think 10 years from now, we'll look back at ChatGPT and be like, wow, that sucked. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that for 5 years, it won't be incredible. Right. And so I tend to lean towards, you know, just my own use of ChatGPT and what it can do. For me, what I've seen it do, I think it is going to have some success, but I'm not a complete expert. I know it's enough to worry me, and that I've started thinking, like, how do I use it rather than be a victim of it? And, you know, part of my background, I don't think we've discussed, I was a PhD student in artificial intelligence before I decided to leave.
Yeah.
So like, I have a pretty good background compared to a lot of people for understanding. I'm not at all, it's been years since I've done that, and I'm not claiming current expertise. I'm just claiming, like, many people have much less expertise than I do. And that's why I think it's worth at least thinking about.
Right.
What are you going to do? How are you going to use this tool? What are your survivable skill sets? And remember also, there's a lot of money to be made if you can replace, even if I offshore my call center to India or the Philippines, it still is very expensive.
Correct.
If I can automate some of that, the savings is enormous. And so there's a lot of money to be made if I can figure it out. Yeah. Which is why I think people will do it. They'll try really hard anyway.
Right. I want to, share with you an implementation that we were doing. I'll not name the customers and whatnot, but this was an e-commerce company, and within the e-commerce marketplace, there is a focus on trust and safety, especially in the third-party sellers. When they upload the listings that they want to sell on the marketplace, you want to make sure that that goes through a review process whereby you check for any kind of pornographic, adult content, hate speech, trademark violation, copyright, weapons, drugs, all like basically prohibited items that you can't sell on the marketplace, right? You want to make sure that is happening. We saw in one of the implementations that currently they were leveraging people. So every listing would go through a human review who would basically go through each listing and say yay or nay, and it will go through and then get part of your taxonomy and part of your catalog, and hence it is searchable and discoverable. But then this euphoria came in that, oh, let's automate this thing. We don't need a lot more humans, especially as the catalog keeps swelling and more sellers are being onboarded on the system. So we did a basic, a time-bound kind of an experiment that will leverage deep learning-based systems such as TensorFlow to build an image analysis. At that time, we didn't have these transformers and other newer techniques like BERT-based models, etc. I'm talking a little bit maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago. But we did have deep learning models such as TensorFlow, and build image analysis models and text analysis models to basically tag whether this is adult content or it has weapons or this and that, right? And remove the human being in the place. And what we ended up doing was that it was so hard to train these models, and you spent so much of computing power that if you started comparing the dollar numbers, right? Then you compared between given a human being, what is the training cost for them to say whether this is adult or not? It's like you don't even have to train them; they'll just see it and know, okay, this is like that.
Yep.
Next. And if you gamify it, like one human at a given point of time, you can show them 10 pictures and they'll say, okay, this one is bad, and they'll done. Like you can do a bulk review of it like right away. Whereas on a machine learning, a deep learning based system. So what I'm trying to say is in that example, what we ended up doing was that we actually relied on having human beings review it because the training cost was so huge for the machine learning training I'm talking about. And you have to train for every damn attribute because it was not generic training that you can just say, oh, this is like whenever you had a very vastly different image or a vastly different text, you have to build a separate model just for that purpose, and it will only do that thing binary, like a like classification, yes or no. And if it is no, then you again subject it to another kind of set of thing. Maybe it is that kind of adult or it is that kind of a thing, right? That didn't happen with humans. So what I was just trying to say is that a lot of people invest a lot in the automation assuming that human beings are costly, while not thinking that there could be a training cost. And again, this was a couple of years back. I'm not saying we did it just recently, but what are your thoughts about that? Like, do people get carried away with thinking that the moment we put technology and automation, it will by default would be cheaper than like putting human beings against that? Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. There's a lot of things we tend to get misled that compute is free. And if you look at probably the biggest example of that is really Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was this nirvana of we're going to have this wonderful government-free, endlessly extensible digital currency. And what we found is when people got done exploiting it, we had whole data centers doing nothing but mining. So there's these unintended consequences. And what we don't know about ChatGPT and trying to use it is what are the unintended consequences? And we know that training a model is very, very expensive. We also know that they're pretty powerful now once they're trained. What you started to describe was like an ideal place where you can do guided training, where you can have the humans there giving input. This is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, and have millions of training examples from the humans. That should work very well, but we don't know. ChatGPT and its cousins are too new to know the unintended consequences, because when Bitcoin came out, the very first thing we saw was not offshore Chinese mining warehouses. And for that matter, when we talk about offshore, stuff, when World of Warcraft first came out as a game, we didn't see like offshore gold farming. But it became a thing like where in a game, you can pay someone in China to grind you a character and give it back to you. So you don't have to play all the boring parts of the game.
Right.
We don't know. Going to your point, I think the harder question is the question of an arms race. You build, actually, let's assume with new technology, you could build a pretty good piece of technology that could figure out most bad listings. The people who want to make bad listings are going to be using the same technology to figure out a way to get around your bot.
Yeah.
And because again, there's money involved. If I can sell something that's a knockoff product on Amazon, I can make a lot of money, particularly if Amazon is generally highly trusted. And I assume that if it says Gucci, it's from Gucci.
Yeah.
Then I make a ton of money if I'm the first person to get fake Gucci back on the site. And so I can, it is an arms race. And that's where what we haven't talked about yet, and I don't know enough to be intelligent about, is the bot arms race. because you build a bot for customer service, great. I build a bot to get concessions, you know, and I use my bot to get free airline mile concessions by spamming the, you know, whatever American Airlines service bot. And suddenly I can deploy bot technology also. And that's, I don't know where that goes. That's too science fiction for me right now, but you just never forget. One of the coolest things I did is I worked in video games, and what video games teach you is that there's very smart people who spend a lot of time thinking about how to cheat. And
Right.
the same thing you're doing in seller trust and safety teaches you that wherever there's money, there's a lot of smart people trying to figure out how to steal it.
Right.
And so with any new technology, if you only think about the positive use cases, it's very powerful. But when you start thinking about the negative use cases, it's very, I won't say scary, but it just changes things. Like, oh, what if this is used? You know, what are all the ways to use these large language model interfaces negatively? There's been some talk about, oh, you can use them to spread hate speech and stuff, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, how do I use it for fraud? You know, we all get those calls. Everybody gets calls on their phone that try and talk them into giving you your password or whatever.
Right.
Well, what went, you know, I was scaring someone with this, but like, if I have the bot scrape your Facebook so it knows you and your friends' names and then come up with a way to talk to you or send you messages, it's going to get a lot better. And so there are going to be bots trying to defraud you. And just like we have firewalls today, you know, where we have like, you have antivirus on your computer, you're going to soon have anti-bot software. And that's going to basically become your white hat bot against the black hat bots trying to filter
Who is who?
Who is who.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting new world coming, but that's an arms race. White hat bots versus black hat bots.
No, I like this point very much, because back in the day, in fact, to a certain degree, we were actually like, so within the advertising tech, so back in the day, during my time in advertising tech, we used to always have these denial of service attacks and distributed denial of service attacks, where you would specifically target the, like, from where the traffic is coming, what is the user agent, what is the time of the day, what is the IP address, like all that good stuff to really understand, is it malicious traffic, is it genuine traffic? And you also wanted to not be getting bombarded with this traffic to protect the websites, etc. Right? And this is what you, and most often than not, you were trying to avoid any kind of bot swarm or storm coming in to basically overwhelm your servers and starve your services. And that's what the, you know, denial of service attack was about, to stop it, curtail it, etc. And you rightly pointed out that we would build these kind of services within the firewall sometimes at the network layer, sometimes even at the application layer to kind of curtail them. But now that I see what you're saying, that it can even basically become even more smarter and even more difficult to detect just by basic user agent information and IP address and all those things that we used to do back in the day, given how real it may look, especially when you communicate with like what examples we have seen recently.
Well, yeah, like things like review writing, right? If you look at the command of language that ChatGPT has, can you train ChatGPT to say, write me 1,000 positive reviews of this product that look completely different?
Absolutely. No, this is a great idea, actually. You're sharing for startups to do it, actually.
But this is going to be very easy comparatively to say, you know, work a little bit with something like ChatGPT to write 1,000 5-star reviews that all sound different. And that have different length. You know, you can tell it, like, they all have to have different length and different details, and some of them have to have images. You can give it a bunch of parameters, and sorting that out.
Oh, yeah.
Almost impossible. And so it's not just a risk for Amazon. You know, the whole internet's based on like reviews and thumbs up and thumbs down. it's gonna get pretty tricky
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to sort out anything that depends on user feedback. And so much of the internet right now is guarded, Reddit or whatever, they're all upvote, downvote, and that's very hackable now. I think.
Absolutely.
And
Totally.
so, yeah, the trust and safety, people aren't talking about that, but trust and safety is going to get very ugly with bots.
Absolutely, totally. I mean, this kind of opens up a complete, like a new can of worms, to speak. I would like to shift a little bit gears on the human
Sure.
impact of chat GPT and such kind of bots and AI technology. So what I have seen, at least so far, with whatever that is out there, is that when you ask a specific question, the answer that it generates seems to be very, like, with very authoritative information. It writes like a really flowery language, which makes it seem as if it is like authentic and like real information. Whereas if you compare it with a search engine such as Google or Bing or whatever, they throw you a bunch of like links, and you go through them in a ranked order to really get to the information that you were looking in the first place. Whereas chat GPT has cut that process and giving you just one result, and not the link, but the actual with the flowery language, the information. And many times it is giving incorrect information, actually. So I have seen even historical facts it's quoting incorrectly with very confidence. So it goes back to the point that it is communicating really well, demonstrating confidence in the way it kind of phrases the statements, but then it is giving factually incorrect information. And I try to do it historical for historical figures, and it is giving actually factually incorrect information. But a lot of people who are not, let's say, have backgrounds such as yourself, like studied AI or like been in a tech for some time, etc., may get like fooled with, like, may think this is like, a lot of people think like Wikipedia is authentic source of truth. They don't know that it can be edited and all. Common people, right? I'm not talking about people in the tech, etc. So they can think the same way about the answers being generated through a bot could be like source of truth. And it can have consequences on the the human race, or the how they learn, or how they get their news. Like, we were already talking about misinformation, news being peddling political agenda, right wing and left wing and this and that. So it's very hard to get like real news nowadays, because everything is laden with all things. With such kind of bots and AI things coming in, how do you think will have impact on the learning ability, and for people to be able to distinguish what is misinformation, what is factual information, what is incorrect, if they start relying on such kind of tools to get their information?
Yeah, I understand the question. It's a good question. It's hard to answer. It points to because chat bots like this answer in a way that sounds like a person, but they're imbued with the trust of, oh, Microsoft is behind this. They get a lot of credibility. And so it's gonna be I think people will learn, it's just like people have learned to suspect phishing attacks, but
Right.
they're gonna have to learn, and it'll be a slow process. It'll start, just like you say, with people trusting it. I've thought a lot about this issue of trust. I think bots are going to make people trust face-to-face real-world communication more, because as you've seen with some of these simulations,
Right.
I can actually deep fake you talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like this conversation we're having right now, a year from now or 3 years from now, you could actually be not a real person.
Yeah.
And you could be some, middle-aged grandma who's got herself a Real Talks podcast bot that interviews people, and I don't even know. But what the bots can't fake yet is 3D space. They can't do stuff in the real world. And so I think you're going to see a rise of base truth being stuff that's unfakeable. And that's going to take time, though, because we're so used to being able to trust video. One thing that's going to totally change, I believe, is in the next few years, we're going to go to a place where pictures and video, people learn, is completely untrustworthy. Because I can show you a video of Mother Teresa returning from the grave and machine gunning down a village full of people, and it's going to look photorealistic.
Right.
And once people realize, like, oh, any person's mouth can be made to say anything to anyone, and it's going to look real.
Right.
You know, I'm going to be easily victimized. A lot of people are. You have, and I have, we both have dozens or hundreds of hours of our video out on the internet.
Yeah.
Which is the perfect thing to train a bot.
Absolutely.
To get our voice right and our face right and our expressions right, and my hands in this picture, my gestures right. And my wife isn't going to know that wasn't me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be used to break marriages also.
And well, the point is, though, someone who knows you extremely well is still going to say, oh my God, that's him.
Yeah.
And once we learn that, no, it isn't, because anybody can say anything, then we have a whole societal shift changing. Because once you realize, oh, wow, nothing I see in video is 100% trustworthy.
Right.
That isn't something we know how to deal with. Right? That anything in video, anything in audio might be fake. And unless I'm touching the physical person, it might not be real. That's a societal transformation that I can see coming, but I don't know how to deal with. I can't tell you. I can't tell you the implications. I can only tell you that it's going to happen, because you understand, and most of our listeners here probably understand, because they come from tech backgrounds, that in fact, 2 years from now, what today is a real interview between us could be my bot talking to you.
Absolutely. Totally with you there. In fact, you know, I was just referring just recently, they said there was a music video that was produced for Drake and what was the other guy? I forgot his name. Whatever the other guy, and they posted a video and they had their images, like the people are singing and rapping to it, and it became a hit actually on the internet. So Drake was one of the musicians, and the other one was, I forgot his name, but and it had, like, I don't know, like in like a week or two, like 7 million downloads or whatever. So
and it wasn't real. It was all made. Yeah,
it was all made from this thing. Somebody posted it, and of course the musicians and the industry is completely shocked, like they're not liking it, because now there was no distribution, there was no money paid, there was, and it's just faking the the vocal variety of these musicians, and somehow
and it's if it's not perfect today, it's going to get perfect very soon.
Very soon. Yeah, exactly.
And this is absolutely, again, you know, let's take somebody dead, John Wayne.
Yeah.
John Wayne has, I don't know, whatever, 50 or 60 or 100 movies, because he made a lot of movies. We've got all that film of him, all of his very distinctive voice.
Yeah.
I can make a John Wayne Western, you know, in 2026. I can make one on my home computer, probably.
Right.
And you know, so all that stuff's going to change. I just don't know. I don't have a big enough mind yet to think through what that means.
Yeah.
But I think it does change our definition of trust, because we have some sayings that build trust into the basic foundation of our world. What do we say? We say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Right.
Well, what if that picture could be created, though?
Yeah, true.
Right? And we have this idea of, like, reporters on the front lines give us truth of what's going on in these faraway places.
Right.
Well, not anymore. Not a year from now, not anymore. because that's so editable. Like that could be a hacker in Romania making up the truth of what's going on in some country.
True.
And we don't have a way, like I don't know how we recode for that. But that's going to become a really big issue of how do you verify things really happen? And it's weird because a lot of the stuff like DocuSign, you know, like, oh, you signed an electronic document, that seems pretty secure right now, may seem foolish a couple of years from now. I don't know.
Right. No, that's a good point, actually. This brings to me a point, actually, that just few years ago, video evidence was inadmissible in Indian courts. Like if you were to produce a proof and say, I have a video recording of something, courts would kind of deny it, that it's not admissible. And they just recently said, okay, we'll accept that as a proof. But now this brings a point again, like even if you accept it, what if it is,
it's going to go away, right?
Yeah,
exactly. When I can show a picture that no one but maybe an advanced computer science team working with forensics can figure out whether it was real or not, all that's going to go. And so it's going to be weird because like things we rely on now, like there's a video at a convenience store and a guy comes in with a gun and robs the convenience store. Well, since I can make that look like anyone, now we can't use it to convict anyone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that, again, that's just part of what I'm talking about, which is I'm not trying to be scary about it. The world will adapt, but I don't know exactly how it will adapt. You can just see that some of the, again, I post a lot on LinkedIn. So there's like tens of thousands of words of my writing, which means that if you want to scrape that and figure out how to write in a way that sounds like me, you can do it. And you can do it to any public figure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so how do we have trust mechanisms in that world? And how do we reestablish authenticity when a computer can fake almost anything? It's tricky. It's an unsolved problem.
Right. No, having talked to you, even like I didn't even think it in that terms, actually, like the way we discussed, it came out through this discussion that trust and safety is going to be a lot more kind of damaging, and especially the impact on the human. It's not so everyone was talking about the jobs losses and all those things, but this angle is even more complicated because now truth is no longer truth. Like things that you used to by default trust is
feel we're very trustworthy. Yeah.
So this is even more bigger impact, I think, because when people are learning, a lot of people nowadays use videos and online content to learn or gain knowledge about certain things. And if you can be faking that,
sure, I can put out a video that shows some respected scholar or respected figure saying stuff. And it will be very hard to tell that, pick someone who's, I don't know, it's hard to pick anybody who's universally respected, but you pick someone that has very high trust and respect, a Nobel laureate. And you can make them say whatever you want.
Correct.
It's very hard then.
Right. I mean, they will have to just, because politicians you cannot trust, because even if they have said certain things, they can always deny it. No, I did not mean that, or I did not say that, or you.
Well, you'll also get that is even if they did say it, they'll say, no, that was just a bot.
But or you misunderstood it, or the video has been edited or whatever. They even say it now whenever they get caught. So they are used to it, but general public will have much more implications, things that they used to trust. And so this has been a great conversation, Ethan. We are like coming to the hour almost, and it was very much enjoyable to having chat with you today again, and being able to learn through your journey, and then shifting our gears towards like what is happening all around us, especially with all the automation and the AI tools. And I think we should all be curious about like how this unfolds. And I liked your analogy where you talked about Newton and the Palm Pilot and the BlackBerry and the iPhone. It's a great, because I did not know about the Newton, but I did know about the Palm, and the maybe that's what my memory went back to. But I think you're right. Like maybe the initial chatbots that came along were more kind of Newtonish. The one that we have today, or maybe they're Palm, maybe they're BlackBerry. And I think it is still going to go, to the next levels in the next few years. And we all have to brace for the impact of like, what do we trust, what do we not trust? And those angles are much more open angles for research and solving them, rather than just the automation of white collar and knowledge worker jobs. So it was a pleasure, having you again. And I would like to just leave a couple of minutes for you to see if you had any last words to say before we wrap up.
No, I think it's an exciting time. And I do think we don't understand what changes. We've let a little bit of a genie out of a bottle. I'm not being negative. I'm not saying, oh, it's definitely going down the world of Terminator and all of that. But we have let a genie out of a bottle that we don't really understand what it's going to do. And particularly, as I've raised your awareness, the trust and safety stuff, there's a real opportunity there to somehow come up with a new system that can authenticate stuff as original. And this has been an issue all throughout history. People putting wax seals on documents and locks on doors in different ways to protect information and authenticity. That's going to just get more. It's going to have to, because our current systems that we've relied on throughout your lifetime and my lifetime as like, oh, voices are really voices and pictures are really pictures, is about to be damaged.
Yeah, totally. I think this has been really awesome to have a chat with you today. And thank you very much for joining this podcast again today, and appreciate your time. And I'd like to tell to all the viewers that if you like this thing, please spread it across. Let us know what else do you like to hear about. And I'll ask Ethan if he has time. Maybe we'll talk on another subject probably sometime later once we have time. But it was a pleasure having you here. Ethan, thank you very much, and hope you have a great day ahead.